Okay, welcome. This is live now in the Yoga Sequencing and Teaching Tips Facebook group. I am here with Cory Sterling. He is a lawyer, small business owner, group and fitness instructor, yoga teacher, and he wrote the Yoga Law book. Great book to have. And that's what we're chatting about today is just the basic legal questions and things that come up in the group frequently that I thought it would be good to get more of like a professional's take on it. We do have some yoga teachers in the group also who are lawyers in the past, but you work specifically with yoga teachers currently, right? And tell us a little bit more about the work that you do.
Happy to. Thanks for having me in the group, Ash. It's awesome to be here. And wow, I started a law firm to work with yoga professionals, yoga teachers who are working online. And yeah, sort of just starting to understand the landscape about what happens legally as a yoga teacher. And the reason how this came about is that I was a yoga teacher myself, and I was a lawyer, and I would just go to different studios and hang out with different friends in different classes and all that sort of stuff. And I realized that no one knew anything about the law. But it's really important because there's a lot of implications for you as a yoga teacher to make sure you're at best practices and that you're protected and that you don't run into problems. So I basically built a legal practice working mostly with yoga teachers, advising them, getting them the right sorts of agreements, the right provisions in the agreements, and making it simple and easy. And one thing I know for certain is that when you as a yoga teacher, it's not like, oh, now I'm a yoga teacher, now I understand everything about the law, because you'd have to study or research that or so it doesn't happen that way. And yeah, I've built a legal practice around supporting yoga teachers and making everything fun and easy and light and chilled and in plain English so that you can go on with your career of building a studio, building clients, building whatever it is that you want to build, and then not having to worry or be concerned about the law as a result.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I think it's so needed because a lot of this information is packed into a 200-hour, or trying to, like, you get a couple little tidbits and then you're kind of off on your own. So we have some topics that came up. I asked my email list. I asked in the group ahead of time. So I have some questions that we just want to cover some basics. So the first thing I would love to just talk on is just insurance in general. Do we need insurance? What is insurance? Where do we get it?
Okay, cool. Yes, the answer is that yes, you need insurance. You definitely need.
Is it required? Somebody asked, is it absolutely like federally required?
No. So an example of where insurance would be required is, let's say that you have some form of designation or qualification as a professional. So let's say you're a nurse. Hypothetically, you're a registered nurse. And you receive your designation to be an RN through the state of Washington Nursing Board and Governance.
Yeah.
They would have certain rules. And in there, they'd be like, well, if you want to be a nurse, insurance is mandatory and you have to have it. With yoga, that's not the case. Yoga doesn't have the same sort of licensing body or officiation or official designation. Like, someone could not be a yoga teacher and teach yoga, and that's not a problem. It's all about the relationship between the teacher and the student and what they're comfortable with. But that being said, the two keys to protecting yourself from liability and from keeping your assets and protecting yourself are insurance and legal documents.
Okay. Yeah.
So you don't need it, but insurance is very, 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 very important, just like legal documents are very, 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 very important. And the whole point is that you want to protect yourself so that if an accident happens or if something happens, you can rely on your legal documents and your insurance policy to not go bankrupt and to not lose everything that you have.
And is this primarily for the US, or is this for is this worldwide information that all of us should know?
Yeah, I would say if anyone anywhere who's practicing online, and especially if you have clients in the United States, it definitely makes sense to have insurance. And just for anything, you have insurance. Like, you go traveling, you get travel insurance. So how would you not have insurance for something that you're doing on a daily basis and that is the crux of your career?
That brings me to a question. I saw this a couple times, and that was, if you have insurance that covers you in the US or in your country and you have online students from somewhere else, are you still covered? or do you have to get separate insurance for them?
So there's two things. So one is I'll say that each individual insurance policy changes, and just like each legal contract is different. So I can't give a blanket answer, but I can say that I do have clients that are protected worldwide, specifically clients who run retreats or work with retreats or, have big online communities with clients from all over. And then I do have clients where they're only protected in the United States, they'll only be protected with clients who are in the United States. So the first thing you have to do is check with your insurance provider, ask them questions, get some understanding. Like I have this game that I always encourage people to do where it's you get your favorite snack, whatever that snack is, and you eat your favorite snack. And at the same time, your phone is on speaker and you're calling your insurance broker. And you're just saying, hey, I'm doing A, B, and C, and I'm doing it online and I'm doing it pre-recorded. And my clients are in Ghana and South Africa and Argentina and whatever. Am I cool with this? And then your insurance broker will be able to tell you. And then in terms of answering, there's a company that's called Be Yogi that offers yoga insurance. And I think you get a discount if you mention our law firm, Conscious Counsel.
Yeah.
You can reach out to Be Yogi, and they're really stellar when it comes to yoga insurance.
Oh.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah. Be Yogi is great. And that's who I refer and refer people to all the time. I think I've talked to them at conferences too, and they cover most online. They even said they cover YouTube and other, mostly all of the things that a yoga teacher would need, because they're made specifically for yoga teachers too.
That's correct.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to look at some comments, and someone said the video ended, but I'm not seeing that. So the video seems to be still going. We still have people on, so that's good. If anyone could leave
Hi, people.
Hi, if anyone else can leave a comment just to make sure that we are still here, that would be awesome. Just say hi. Tell us where you're from, or tell us how you're doing today. So we're going to just keep rolling with it. Good. Yep, I'm on. Thanks. Okay. Yes, still on. Wonderful. Wonderful. So Wi-Fi issues are always happening to other people, but you know what? We're going to keep rolling. All right. So insurance clarification. It's important to have insurance. That's what I heard. Be Yogi is a great insurance company. You can get a discount. Mention Conscious Counsel. I also have a discount code too. But either way, if you can get a discount, go ahead and do that. And the cost of insurance, what is the range? Because some people were saying they can get it for super cheap, or maybe it's way expensive. What's the price of that?
I can't speak to that.
Okay.
I used to run a yoga festival, and I remember we paid for insurance for a festival, which would be different than an online insurance, or what the cost would be. So I can't really say, but it's sort of like buying anything that there's prices and different features.
And I've seen a range of like 150 to 200 per year. So that's about what I've seen out there, but it just depends on who you go with. Is it better to go with someone who provides yoga teacher insurance, or like a local insurance company? I
would go with someone who provides yoga teacher insurance.
Okay. And then moving from insurance, waivers.
Yeah.
What's about waivers? What are waivers? Why do we need them? Again, this is a question of, do we absolutely need waivers? Is it okay if we don't have one? What about them?
So if the first question is, do we absolutely need waivers? The same question could be, do I absolutely need a seatbelt when I'm in a car?
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. I guess at law, you have to wear a seatbelt, whereas at law, you don't need to have a waiver, but you just want to think about your waiver of liability as a seatbelt. And that, God forbid, if something happens and someone gets injured or hurt, or something happens while you're teaching them, you will be protected. That's your seatbelt, essentially. So explain in very plain English, to sort of explain how waivers work and why they function. Anytime you are teaching someone yoga, even if it's for free, even if it's in the backyard, it doesn't matter. When you are facilitating a service or activity for someone else, you have a responsibility to make sure they do not suffer damages while they are participating in that activity with you.
And what kind of thing, what are some examples of things that might happen? Is it the actual yoga teaching? Is it a physical thing? Like, what would happen? What are some accidents that could occur?
Yeah, if I think to the last little bit, I had a client who was doing a handstand and fell on their head. I had a client who, my clients are the studio, so not the individual person who's doing them, but the studios are the teachers. People get injured. One teacher was teaching something. The student said that they suffered damages. They didn't want to do certain postures, and the teacher was encouraging them to stay in it and told them to go back to it. And they didn't understand this person's medical history. But typically it will be something around a physical injury, or it could also be a mental injury, or which is more difficult to prove at law. But it'll be like breaking an arm, hitting your head, getting migraines, or like a post-concussion type symptoms, or like anything physical to your body where your quality of life has suffered as a result of the experience. And then also the big thing is if your earning capacity suffers as well. So one thing that we don't think about is, I'm a teacher, I'm teaching, let's say I've got a class, 6 people come by my house, or I've got 8 clients online. One of them happens to be a computer programmer or developer. There's some accident, I'm teaching some modification, or we're doing some sort of one-legged twist or a balance twist. They slip, they fall because they're sweaty, they hit their head. They're no longer able to look at a screen. Their whole job is looking at a screen. I'm responsible because I facilitated the activity for them. Yeah. And then it's like, then their earning potential, if they're out of work for 2 months, I'm responsible to pay that. And
wow.
Yeah.
Insurance would cover that.
Your insurance would cover it, and and also more importantly, your legal documents would cover that as well. Because the other thing with insurance too, you just have to be careful that insurance is going to cover you for all the things that you're doing and all the ways that you do it. So YouTube's a good example. Pre-recorded is a good example. You have a database of videos that someone goes back and watches. You want to make sure you're covered for all those things.
Yeah.
So essentially the waiver is a document where normally I would be responsible if someone got hurt, but because they signed this document, they signed away their legal right to sue me. And if they try to sue me or threaten to sue me, I would rely on that legal document.
Yeah. Speaking of waivers with online, so I was reading a little bit in this about your book about some waivers that are online that are just like check boxes. Like, is that enforceable if it's just a checkbox and you don't require someone to read it? What would be a better way to have a waiver? Or someone just asked in the comments, are they really enforceable?
Yes, the answer is 100% yes. And I can tell you that they are, because I deal with it on a weekly basis. On a weekly basis, I'm defending a waiver or drafting a waiver, or I'm in negotiations with a client who's potentially getting sued, and I'm relying on the waiver. The strength of the ability to respond to a legal issue will depend on how good the legal document you have is. So if you're downloading a general template from someone, or you got it from your friend, or you're borrowing it from someone who has a successful business, these are the things I hear all the time. That waiver may not be sufficient or good enough. And just as an example, so like waivers have to cover all the different things that you do and the different ways that you do it. If it doesn't, like, let's say I have a waiver that I borrowed from my friend, and I have an on-demand video library and my friend doesn't, or my friend got their waiver from downloading it for free from the internet, which you can do. If someone gets hurt doing an on-demand video class with me, they're going to say, hey, well, I'm suing you. I did this class. You gave, the instruction was negligent, whatever. People don't need a reason to sue each other in the United States of America. They just do it. And then if I'm responding on behalf of my client, I'm going to rely on the waiver. So I'm going to say, we told you it was pre-recorded. We told you it'd be unsupervised. We told you you were responsible to make sure the environment was safe where you practice. And you still agreed to participate with us and not hold us responsible. If, as an example, the waiver doesn't have a provision around that, they would say, hey, I got injured doing a pre-recorded class. I would be looking at my crappy template and I'd be saying, oh, well, you signed this, so now you're not sued. That person's going to take it to a lawyer. They're going to tell them what happened. The lawyer's going to say, oh, well, you're doing pre-recorded, and this document doesn't say anything about pre-recorded. Therefore, you never signed away your rights as it relates to doing pre-recorded classes, and therefore you still have legal rights and you can sue this person. And then you get drawn into negotiations and settlements and thousands of dollars, and then it's just not fun for anyone.
With all that, what about like teaching charity classes, teaching for free?
I don't know. Ashley just left. I don't know if it's just me here alone, but I'm sure she's going to come back.
I'm
and I
here.
don't know. Okay, super. I didn't know we were still going, so I was getting ready to answer the question by myself, but I'm happy.
Yeah. So people who are back to that question, if you're teaching for free, if you're doing charity events, free events, is that the same as if you're charging money? Like, do you still need to go through the whole same process, waivers, insurance?
Yeah, and I want to get to back to your question about what the process looks like. So I'll make sure to answer that. But just first and foremost, if you are doing something for free, that duty of care exists. You still are facilitating an activity. You have a responsibility to make sure someone doesn't get hurt in the facilitation, and if they do, you are responsible. There's a different standard of care, and I don't want to get too legally, but there are different standards that you have to uphold if you're doing something for paid as a professional, as opposed to if you're doing it for fun and for free. But you still, just because you're not charging someone doesn't mean that you do not have a duty of care to make sure they do not get injured. So that answers that question. In terms of the process, the thing to know about waivers and what makes them different than everything else is these are documents where someone is signing away their legal rights to, and so government and law takes that very, very seriously. In terms of, it's different if you have a client service agreement of like, oh, you're getting a 10-pack of classes and it's $60 a class, so it's going to be $600. Like, okay, if there's an issue around that, it's pretty easy to deal with. But when it comes to signing away legal rights, courts and governments have a higher threshold that they look to because they take signing away legal rights very seriously. So essentially, the things that need to happen is someone needs to be provided with a copy of the agreement to review and read before they either click I agree or before they sign electronically. And then they have to sign electronically or click I agree to be bound to the provisions of this waiver of liability, with it hyperlinked ideally. And then in that situation, now you're fine. So I've given you an opportunity to review it. You've reviewed it and signed it or agreed to it. And now I can provide services to you with the peace of mind knowing that I will not get sued if someone comes up.
Yeah. And I think one of the best ways to do this is to have like a software that does this, or have like a sign up process. So rather than just handing out Zoom links to everyone to join their classes if it's online, or just saying, meet me at the park, like actually having a registration process can keep you, I think, the safest. Have that.
Yeah. And you're also going to want to keep you're going to want to have a copy of all of the different agreements that you get signed. So
how long is a waiver good for typically?
A waiver is good for as long as the activities and risks of what you're doing stay the same. So for example, like when COVID hit and everyone was doing everything online, we had to update everyone's waiver to cover them for online. But as long as the activities and the way you offer them are the same, then the waiver of liability will remain good.
So what about YouTube though, or free online classes? There's no really gated entry. It's just you watch it. Is it implied consent? Someone asked about implied consent. If you need release forms or disclaimers, is that different than a waiver? Waiver, disclaimer, same thing, not the same?
Yeah. Implied consent means like we understand that you're going to be doing this and what the risks of it are. So the thing to know is that when it comes to the difference between waivers and disclaimers, and we can use YouTube and social media as an example. So the gold standard is the waiver of liability, because that's a signed or executed agreement where someone is agreeing not to hold you legally responsible, assuming that you outlined the risks and the activities clearly enough. Now, because YouTube is unilateral in the sense like I'm posting a video on YouTube and whoever in the world is going to be looking at it or doing things with it, I don't know, but they're just going off and doing it. The best that you can have is a disclaimer. So it's sort of like at the Olympics, the waiver of liability is a gold. At the Olympics, disclaimer, social media disclaimer, YouTube disclaimer would be like the bronze, because you're still posting something saying like, hey, these are our qualifications. Don't push your body. Do it in a safe environment. See a medical, like you can still do all of that to them. And then you can make an argument to say, well, before you had access to the video or before the video started, we brought your attention to the risks and you agreed to continue watching it. And all of that is like the context to support you in a legal argument. but it's not as good as a waiver. So the golden rule is get as many people to sign the waiver as possible. And then if you're doing things online in a unilateral way, just make sure you have a disclaimer to protect you as best as possible, because that's the best you can do.
Yeah. Okay, so when I opened a studio one time a few years back, no longer, but one thing I was surprised by was how many policies and contracts and things there were that I had to create or needed to. So besides a waiver, when it comes to yoga teachers and maybe someone thinking of opening a studio or just starting their own business, what other kind of contracts are things that people need to just think about? Because sometimes you don't know what you don't know. So what contracts are most common?
The way that I always explain to a new yoga teacher who doesn't understand anything about the law is think about the different relationships you have in your business. And the goal for each relationship is to communicate openly and honestly. So you have a relationship online with people whose email addresses you collect or payments you collect or anything like that. You have a relationship with your clients in terms of liability with a waiver, and then also with a service agreement. If you're hiring other teachers, you'd have a relationship with them. If you're renting a physical space with a landlord, you'd have a relationship with them. And the goal is for each relationship you have to communicate expectations openly and honestly. And as best as possible, you want to be able to say to people like, hey, you and I have this working relationship together that follows all of the rules and the laws, and here's what you can expect from me, and this is what I can expect from you. So in a very simplistic, basic blanket way, if you're just starting out as a teacher, you're going to want a privacy policy, terms of service, and disclaimer. So that's
just one. Is that privacy policy?
Privacy policy and terms of service is one together. Okay. That's for personal information that you collect. Then you'd want a disclaimer for social media, for your Instagram, for TikTok, for all the different platforms that you're on, for YouTube, all that stuff. The third would be the waiver of liability not to get sued. And then the fourth would be a client service agreement, which communicates your relationship with the client. So this is how much you're paying. This is what cancellation looks like. If you have to reschedule, this is what it looks like. You know, if I'm giving you pamphlets or booklets, I retain ownership in those. You don't own them. You can only use it in the context of studying them as a student.
Is that stuff that can be like in the description of a class if you have it listed online, or where would it be like a contract, or where would you put these things?
You would have, ideally you'd have some sort of software like you could use DocuHub, DocuSign, something like that. You could use something like Wellness Living or MindBody or Walla or any of these other, ways to consolidate and organize your online studio, right? Because even though we're teachers, it's like every individual teacher who's a yoga teacher online, essentially you have your own online studio. That's what it is. So you can use softwares that help. And then basically you just build, when you're setting up whatever software provider you're doing, you have an opportunity to input agreements, and you input your service agreement, which would say, okay, you're buying a 10-pack for $100. You have a 3-month window to use this. After 3 months, everything expires. You can't transfer it to anyone else. You can stop working with us whenever, but there's no refunds for any unused classes. If you don't reschedule within 24 hours, then it's deemed that you've taken the class, something like that.
Yes, I know it's a lot for new teachers or new studio owners to think about, or it's a lot of content. I just remember being in that place of overwhelm, but I would sit for a while and just write things out by myself, just so that there was clear communication, not necessarily hiring someone to do it for me. But I remember just writing things just so I was clear and the clients were clear on all of the things. And I think it's good to at least do that.
Yeah. And part of the reason why we came up with Law is Fun, which is like
tell us about that.
Yeah. So Law is Fun is, I operate a law firm called Conscious Counsel, which is usually will be yoga studios, yoga retreat organizing, teacher trainings, all that sort of work. That's like very, very customized, hands-on, answering questions, going back and forth. And then I realized like there's a gap in the market because there's so many yoga teachers who are just starting and don't know what they don't know, don't really have $5,000 to invest in legal at this moment, but they still need to be protected. And the expectation is not that they're going to learn everything about the law. So we built a second website and a second business called lawsfun.com because law should be fun. And essentially with that, you can get a package of 4 documents. I'm a yoga teacher. I know exactly what I need. I need these 4 documents for the different relationships I have, at a much lower price point, like a third or a quarter of the normal price point of working with a lawyer. It's not legal services, but you still get customized specific documents to you, and then you go out into the world and you use them. And it's like, cool. I'm not going to spend all my time becoming a lawyer, nor do I want to, but I don't want to get sued, and I want to make sure that I get to keep the money that I'm bringing in. So I'll just get this set of customized documents and be on my way.
Yeah, that's a super helpful for specific for yoga teachers too. It's nice to have that available. That yeah, it's nice to have that because yoga teachers, even me being here sitting 10 years as a yoga teacher, I'm still sort of like, what exactly do I need and where can I get it and who do I talk to? And is it someone local? Like there's just so many questions that I think could be answered just with a few simple documents perhaps.
Yeah, that's it. And I think most importantly, my reflection from having done this for 6 years is you want to work with someone who understands the yoga industry.
Yeah.
And so often I'm looking at documents for yoga professionals that are drafted by someone who doesn't understand anything about yoga or how a yoga business works. And they're just like, it's not good enough, in the sense that, yeah, everything should be special for what it is that we do.
That's the website?
That's it, lawsfun.com.
Okay, just wanted to write that up there, lawsfun.com. Okay. I do have questions on music licensing. I want to touch on that because that comes up quite a bit when people are asking for playlists. And then there's comments in the group of, well, you shouldn't be actually using Spotify, or you shouldn't be doing this unless you're licensed. And it's, anyway, music licensing. Can you give us a kind of a brief synopsis of that?
Yeah, music licensing's changed quite a bit, like let's say in the past 10 years. And the way that it used to work, well, let me just explain what it is. You have an account with Spotify, or you have an account with Apple Music. You have your phone, you're using your phone, you have this music on you all the time, so you can use it however you want. But when you actually sign up to use these platforms and services, there are certain rules around how you're allowed to use the music and what sort of license they're giving you. So a license at law, as a technical term, means like someone owns something, but they're letting you use it. But they're letting you use it under certain rules and regulations and terms. So when you have a Spotify account or you have an Apple Music account, a lot of the times that it's called a use license. So they're allowing you to use it, but it's just a personal use license. So that means that you're just only allowed to use that music for yourself and not for commercial purposes. The issue is that there's all these yoga teachers or yoga studios that don't pay for other licenses and don't pay for a professional license or a commercial license. And they're technically breaking the rules of how they're allowed to be using the license. So if I'm doing anything in a commercial purpose, I technically should not be using my Spotify account for that because I only have it for personal use. So the issue where it lies is that everyone is using their musical licenses not according to the terms of that license. And sometimes you get a cease and desist letter, and sometimes you get a letter with someone alleging that you owe them thousands of dollars, or you have to pay thousands of dollars to get a different type of license.
Yeah. So what kind of music can be used, or what's the term royalty free mean?
Royalty free or license free means that like you can just use it, right? If you were to go to Google and put in license free relaxation meditation music, something would come up. It may not be your favorite, and it may be something that you don't know. But what that means is someone's made the music and they've just put it out there for free. So no one's getting royalties from when it's played, and no one has a license over it to say you're only allowed to use this with our permission, right? A license is someone saying, we own this, but you're allowed to use it. If it's license free, it just means, here you go. It's like stock photos, like license free photos.
Okay.
Same with photography. So there are music providers that have license-free music. It's just not going to be Bruno Mars or whatever else it is that you're listening to.
Yeah, I know there are some conversations in our Facebook group about some license-free or royalty-free music, where you can get it, where you can get subscriptions. So I think it's just important for people to be aware that Spotify or the user license only, or just those subscriptions that are only meant for you, are not meant necessarily for public use or yoga classes. even charity or free yoga classes or one-on-ones, because that's still a commercial use. So just to be aware of that.
And it's the thing that I always say to clients, it's an informed decision. Like you make the choice of if you think that this is, because realistically there are rules and laws, and the question is it important to you to abide by everything? And it's a personal decision.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that. And there were, let's see, someone asked about a little bit more about going on a different direction now on independent contractor, LLC, and this is more primarily, I think, United States based LLCs and becoming getting a business license. The specific question was, if you teach in multiple cities as an independent yoga teacher, do you need multiple business licenses for every single city?
I would just, if that's the specific question, because there's a lot we could talk about with LLCs and contractors, employees, but my understanding for that would be, well, firstly, like, is the person just working online for different studios, or are they physically going to different studios?
I think they're physically going and renting different spaces. Like they have a community center they rented here. So it's an independent contractor and they teach at an MMA gym over here in a different city. So if you teach for different cities, I mean, I know myself, I wouldn't personally even worry about it. I would be like, I have insurance, I'm covered.
Yeah, I don't. So the answer to that question would be, I think a lot of the with law related questions, a lot of the time is where you're based. So that's where they'll determine the jurisdiction. So let's say I'm in Seattle, Washington. I have an LLC that's based in Washington. My bank accounts are in Washington. My business is like, if my business is based there, then I would make sure to be there. And then like, I would see what happens if there's some issue around business licenses. But what I can say is, like, I've worked with more than 1,000 clients all over the world, the majority in the United States. And it's extremely, extremely, extremely rare that any issues come up around business licenses. So I'd say where you're based is the most important place to take care of that, if that's a requirement. And then from there, you can sort of figure it out. But I also don't know if that should be a priority. I think there's a lot of other things to figure out first.
Yeah. And then stepping back, independent contractor versus employee, I think that's one of the things that are like the primary topics of let's talk business about yoga teaching. It's what's the difference between independent contractor, employee, and also sole proprietor. Is that another word for independent contractor? Yes.
Okay. Let's jump in. Let's do it. Let's answer all the questions. Okay.
Yes.
So sole proprietor, LLC, partnership, limited partnership, all of those are something called business entities, which means there are different types of ways that you can operate your business. When you're a sole proprietor, it means that you and your business legally are the same person.
Okay.
When you form an LLC, it means that your business is a separate legal entity. It pays its own taxes. It has its own liability. It has its own bank account. It's like, think about giving birth to something. In the eyes of the government, an LLC or a company that's created is a separate legal entity. So what that means is there's a difference between you and the company. And the reason why a lot of the times we'd see yoga teachers registering LLCs or creating an LLC or incorporating a company is because there's more your personal, when you operate as a sole proprietor and you are your business and you pay the same taxes and you have the same bank account and all that sort of stuff. God forbid, if there's an accident and your business needs to satisfy any debts that have come from getting sued or issues with someone else or anything comes up, you personally will be responsible to satisfy all of those debts. So let's say Cory, I have a sole proprietorship as a law firm. I've got $5,000 in the bank. Someone gets injured, and through my company, let's say I'm a yoga teacher for this example, and they suffered $5,000 of damages. I personally will have to satisfy that debt. When you have an LLC, there are some very particular nuances, but I just want to get the general principle out. If I'm an LLC, let's say the LLC is registered to operate yoga classes, and I'm doing 6 classes a day and really, really busy, and the LLC has $3,000 in it. God forbid someone gets injured and it's $15,000 that they're looking for in medical bills. I could pay the $3,000, which are all of the assets that I have, declare bankruptcy with the LLC, and that person would never be able to go back after my personal assets like a car or a house or savings. Whereas when you operate as a sole proprietor, it's you personally will have to satisfy any debts that are owed based on the business. Does all that make sense?
I think so. Yes. Well, and I want to ask too, my personal experience was I did not form an LLC until I absolutely had to. So I worked as a yoga teacher at different studios. I also taught rooftop yoga and events, and I worked as a sole proprietor, just an independent contractor, and I had insurance. I feel like I had no worries there. So I don't really recommend to a lot of people that they have to get an LLC when they start out. I didn't register mine until I purchased a yoga studio. And in that case, I had to, because the business had to be on the lease for that I was signing. So in that way, I was kind of forced into starting my LLC, which I really am appreciative of. But for the prior 6-7 years, I didn't have an LLC. So is that something that you would recommend new teachers start with if they aren't signing big contracts? What's the risk if they don't do an LLC?
There are 3 variables about why you'd register an LLC. So 3 considerations. One is, how risky are the activities that you're doing? If you're just doing yoga and you've got insurance and you've got legal, you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
The second would be for taxation purposes. So LLCs pay a different tax rate than you would pay personally. So if you're earning a whole bunch of money and you want to keep some of the money in the company that you're not withdrawing, it can make sense to register an LLC for that. And then thirdly, you'd register an LLC if you have a whole bunch of personal assets that could be at risk. So sometimes it happens for me that I have clients who are just starting yoga is a second career for them, or a side project or something like that, but they have a family home, they have a whole bunch of savings, they have a car, whatever it is. And then they're like, what do I do? And I'm just like, no brainer, register an LLC. Like,
oh, that makes sense.
You don't want to run into an issue where, God forbid, there's some freak accident and something happened, and now your house is at risk for this side business. Like, pay the money. It's the cost of doing business to get set up legally and properly, and that's just how it goes. So
yeah. So back in my 20s, when I rented a cheap apartment with my dog, and that's all I had, I didn't need an LLC. There wasn't much that I had. But now with a house and kids and a family, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's different. And even like 2 weeks ago, I had a client who received a whole bunch of money from inheritance. And then it's like, I just got an email. I'd done something for them a couple of years ago. And she's just like, hey, I came into all of this money. I want to register an LLC today. Like, let's get on this process. So,
do retirement accounts and 401ks count as assets? That's a quick question.
I don't. I think so, but I'm not. I can't say 100%. I would say intuitively, I would think so. Because you personally have to satisfy the debt. At law, if there's a judgment against you and you have to pay that amount, the step before bankruptcy is liquidating all assets that you have. So I would say, I think.
Okay. Yeah, that was really helpful, because that's actually something I've never thought about before. There are reasons why you would start an LLC, and that varies from state to state and country to country. Some have it, some don't. So you really just have to check right with your.
Yeah, LLC is an American thing. So for example, in Canada or in Australia, there aren't LLCs. In Australia, it's called a sole trader. In Canada, it's called a sole proprietor. In the United States, it's also a sole proprietor. In Canada, we have partnerships and we have companies that you can incorporate. We don't have LLCs. And like in the United States, there's LLCs, and then there's like a tax designation, which is an S corp, which is something different as well. So
I was actually going to personally ask you that. Is it difficult to change from an LLC to an S corp?
No, there are forms to fill out, but it's a tax. I don't do tax stuff. Yeah, but it's a tax decision more than it is anything else.
Okay, because that's next on my agenda, actually, is to switch over.
Cool.
So sounds like a tax thing. Okay, I can.
Yeah. And then sorry, independent contractors, employees. I didn't even have a chance because I wanted to explain the.
Yeah, that was really helpful though. So yes, the difference.
I'm happy it's helpful. Contractors, employees. It's going to come up it's relevant in 2 ways. One, if you're the teacher. The other, if you're the studio owner, you're the business owner.
Yeah.
As a teacher, the thing that you want to be aware of is that if you're a contractor, it depends what jurisdiction you're in, because in some jurisdictions like California, if you're a yoga teacher teaching at a yoga studio, you're automatically an employee, because what you're doing is the core service of the business you work for. And then in other states, the test changes, but you just want to be aware of how much control your boss has over the way that you provide the services. Because the most common thing that I see for individual teachers is that a studio will try to take advantage as best as they can by calling a teacher a contractor, but treating them like an employee. So in whatever jurisdiction you're in North America or whatever part of the world, you could just do something as simple as Google, independent contractor test state of Maine, and see in Maine what it means to be an independent contractor, and think about your job and the agreement that you signed and how all of it looks. And because you have to know that if someone's treating you like an employee, at law, you should benefit from the protections of being an employee and not just.
So what do you do then in that instance where you are a contractor and they're treating you like an employee? What could you say?
You could go to your boss and you could say, hey, I did some research, or I heard this incredibly intelligent, talented, handsome lawyer give a webinar, and he was saying that that I should look to understand what the independent contractor employee test is. You're actually treating me like an employee. And the thing that's not intuitive for all yoga teachers is that you're actually in a stronger legal position as the independent contractor who's treated like an employee, because you're bought, like the studio's at risk. You're not at risk. So let's say you go to your boss and they say, you're fired for bringing this up, or if you tell anyone else about this, there's going to be really big problems. You have a lot of recourse available to you in terms of reporting the business, standing up for if you want to file for unemployment insurance on the basis that you were always an employee, you can do that. Like, I help studio owners more than I help teachers in that regard, where they have an issue with a teacher who wants employment insurance or is alleging that they're an employee. I'll look at everything and give an opinion to them to say, okay, well, actually, you have to change the way the services are provided, or you're fine and this person is just irrationally looking for a particular outcome. But as a teacher, if you're treated like an employee, you deserve to be an employee because there are benefits from being an employee.
Yeah, I've been both, and I've been on both sides of the, I was an independent contractor treated like an employee, and I knew it. And I've been all of those with different studios and different places. Also coming from the studio owner side, I also saw that a lot of states are kind of cracking down on it, saying that, you have to have them as employees because that's the job description. Yeah, it's just, it's neat to see in different sides.
And it's also like of all of the issues that require the most amount of lawyering on my behalf, I would say independent contractor employee is the one where, like, I have to think the most. It's the most specific to a situation of combination of the jurisdiction plus the rule that they want to see done and all that sort of work. Whereas like a waiver is not, it's more doing the things and following the list and make sure that everything's being done. But the contractor employee always has variables involved.
Yeah. And with independent contractor or employee, what about non-compete agreements? Are those enforceable?
Rarely, very, 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 very rarely. And let's say, and I can make a blanket statement of, I'm a yoga teacher who works 6 hours a week for a studio, and I want to work at other studios in town and they're trying to restrict me. That almost will never fly. But what happens
when a studio owner just decides then not to schedule you or let you go because you are working at other studios?
Well, there could be particular recourse. This is where like the contractor employee question comes up, where they may not be able to. It depends if it's at will employment. Okay. Well, I mean, if it's at will employment, I think that makes them an employee if it's at will employment.
So at will employment, explain that.
At will employment exists in a lot of jurisdictions in the United States. And essentially it just means like, I can fire you whenever I want. You can quit whenever you want. And there's no recourse available to anyone. But usually it needs to explicitly be stated in an agreement.
Yeah. How does that work? Let's see. This person asks, how does that work with a studio teacher working as an energy exchange? So they have free classes so they have free access to classes to teach. Should the studio still have an employment contract with that teacher?
firstly, I wish that I could meet these people, because like it's so much more fun for me to like know people's names and say hi and build, have some sort of relationship. But energy exchange, in my opinion, and I'm not sure if I wrote about it in the book, but technically energy exchanges are, I don't want to say illegal, but they're not a good look, because the way that the IRS works and the CRA works is, if you are giving something away for free that is the core service of what you do, that needs to be taxed, right? Because if everyone who had a yoga studio just said like, oh, like do this, like cook for me and do this and paint my room and do all these things, and I'll just, you can come to yoga for free. Those are things that people would be paying for, and they would be paying tax on that. So energy exchange, like there's a tax issue for the studio owner. And then B, there are rules around work being done for, with minimum wage rules that apply as well. So I don't love energy exchange. I understand why studio owners do it. I definitely understand why teachers do it, because it can be a sweet deal where it's like, oh, cool. Like, for me, myself, when I worked at a studio, I taught 2 times a week and I got a free month, and they had like 6 locations, and I went all the time, and it was a sweet deal. But if I was I just last week, I have a new studio who was opening up, and we had a conversation about energy exchange, aka free labor in exchange for circumventing paying taxes, what a lawyer calls it. And I was like, I would not recommend that you do that. You can do that if you want, but here are the legal implications of it. So yeah.
Yes, this brings me back to my childhood. I went to a farmer's market with my uncle in California, and he brought a bag of avocados, and we started trading avocados from his yard to the vendors for different things like jam, jelly, and the different things at the farmer's market. And the lead people in the farmer's market came to us and was like, tisk, these you've got to pay, because there's fees based on what they're earning, so you can't pay in avocados.
But there is actually like, there's not an exception, but like this is the way that it works, right? Let's say was it your uncle?
Yeah.
If your uncle is an avocado farmer,
oh no,
then he cannot trade avocados. But let's say he just has an avocado tree, and that's called bartering, I think, is like the
I think they were, but they shut us down for that. They didn't like that.
Sure. And I can see how an organizer for a farmer's market wouldn't want that. But like let's say your uncle was a mechanic, and he happens to have an avocado tree, and it's not a business, and he doesn't sell avocados to anyone. I could go to whoever and be like, hey, I'll trade you an avocado for this. I'll trade you this for that. But if I'm a mechanic, I can't be giving away something that's the core function of my business.
Okay.
So I couldn't barter away mechanic services for a breakfast burrito at a farmer's market.
Now I don't feel so bad from from doing that. Then that actually makes me feel better.
Getting proper legal advice can sometimes alleviate stress or.
So and I'm seeing people asking about studio questions, but I'm not going to really jump into a lot of those, because if anyone owns a studio, I recommend, there's a couple of Facebook groups I recommend, the Yoga Studio Owners group. Also, Nicole has the Profitable Yoga Studio group that I recommend, because a lot of those questions have been asked there. And so it's like the question of, what about paying contractors when no one shows? That's kind of more of it's up to you decision for studio owners, not necessarily a legal thing in some regard. But I guess
also you can just put, if you want, you can put my my email address. I just wrote it in that. You can add it there, and if anyone has studio questions, they can email me, and I'll be happy to hop on a call.
What is your email address?
I just put it in our private chat.
Oh,
Cory at consciouscounsel.ca.
Okay, Cory. Counsel.ca. I'm just going to put it right here because this makes it easier.
Perfect.
Like that. Right there? Nope, not that one.
That's the last
one.
Yeah, it's me.
Conscious Counsel.
I love this little chat, your little like that you can have
my banners
on the the banners.
Yep. StreamYard's nice like that.
Way to
We've
go.
got Law, and Law is Fun again is your place where you have
the automated packages of documents.
Awesome. That's so helpful. And I think that pretty much covers a lot of the questions that we had. There were some specific ones, but I think what we covered with the more general topics kind of got into the specifics as well. And so, and if you have questions, you're okay if people are emailing you?
Yeah, for sure. Send me an email.
Okay. Cory at Conscious
Happy
Counseling.
to hear what's going on. And also for me, it's just always interesting to hear what's on people's minds. And rarely I get a new question, which is very exciting for me. I get a lot of the same questions, but I just love thinking about this stuff and doing my work and helping yoga professionals. So it's a pleasure.
Well, and that's amazing. Thank you so much. I think this has been a lot of fun, actually, talking just through some questions that even I had about online teaching and waivers and insurance. And I think can be a great place that now when people have these questions in our Facebook group, I can just say, go watch this. So it will help give a good overview.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Ash, and nice to meet everyone. I'm sorry I didn't get to meet you all personally, but here to support you and keep being awesome. Keep offering great yoga services to your clients and enjoy the journey.
Thank you.